I'm sure you know already that the main consideration between a husband and wife is that the husband should be mashpia and the wife should be makabel. If you haven't studied the subject, it's very important to do so. Because that is the essence of the relationship. Torah says about women that el ishech chukosech. A makabel has a chuka. A makabel waits to be makabel. There's a hunger. The mashpia, on the other hand, has pleasure and feels fulfilled and like a real mensch when he knows that he is being mashpia and satisfying that hunger. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that the husband is better at everything than his wife. Very often, the wife is better at handling money, keeping the checkbook, paying the bills. But it should never be that the wife is doing that because she feels that the husband is incapable. In other words, she is taking his responsibility and replacing him. That creates a problem for everybody. But if the husband gives that responsibility to his wife and she is doing it for him, then the balance of mashpia and mekabel remain healthy. The mashpia feels that whatever the issue is and whatever the problem is, it's his responsibility to solve it. Not his fault, but his job. So even if the makabel has a problem being makabel, it's the husband's job to help, to fix it, to solve it. Like we say in the Maimer, that the mashpia has to give the makabel koyach to be makabel. And the way that the mashpia gives the makabel the koyach to be makabel is by making her feel completely safe. I can't tell you how many marriage counseling sessions hang on this issue. She doesn't feel safe. She feels that whenever there's a problem, he's going to run away and hide. And she's going to be alone with the problem. Feeling alone means that the marriage did not work or is not working. Because when you come out from the chuppah, you are never going to be alone again. That's called marriage. V'hoyu lebasar echad. That takes away the feeling of being alone. Sometimes you actually like to be alone, but you're never going to be alone again. That's the good part. But if the husband disappears, not necessarily physically, but emotionally, not my problem. I did what I'm supposed to do. Now the rest is your problem. That is not a marriage. Not a mashpia, not a mekabel. Every marriage, unless there was a physical and medical problem, other than that, it was always a problem with the mashpia not being mashpia, and the mekabel not being mekabel. And that's partly because we are influenced by the world. We're influenced by what we read and what we see and what we hear. And the message or the attitude is that a husband and a wife are equal partners. Equal partners means I do my half, you do your half. So if I think I did my half and you're not happy, well, then it's your problem. But of course, the truth is that there is no 50-50, half and half. And there are no equal partners. Marriage doesn't need a partner. Marriage needs a mekabel and a mashpia. The husband has to be 100% mekabel, not 50%. And the wife has to be 100% mekabel and not 50%. To be 50-50 means sometimes I'm mekabel, sometimes you're mashpia, sometimes I'm mashpia, sometimes you're mekabel. In other words, there is no healthy man, there is no healthy woman, and you expect it to be a good marriage. So let's explain a little bit better. What does it mean to be a mashpia? Number one, to be a mashpia means I feel, I understand, and I see what needs exist. Like a mashpia in yeshiva, he looks at a bacha and he sees what's lacking, what's missing, what's not right, what's not balanced. If he doesn't see what the problem is, then he won't be a mashpia, he'll just be a policeman. And nobody will benefit from that. If he doesn't understand exactly what this particular bacher or young man is hungering for, he will demand from him things that are unnecessary. And not only won't he help him, he'll destroy him. So the first thing is a mashpia understands or feels the hunger. So he knows what needs to be provided, what needs to be given. He is the giver. But he can't give just whatever he wants. So you can't sit here and decide what your wife wants. What does a wife want? She wants jewelry. She wants you to wash dishes. That's destructive. The only way to know what a wife wants is to hear it from her or to see it in her. It doesn't always have to be verbal. It doesn't have to be teveya bepeh. But if you say something and you see your wife got upset, now you know where the sensitivity is. Understand it, take it seriously, and be considerate. Something that makes your wife happy, now you're getting to know her. But pay attention. So it's very strange when a husband says to me, "What can I do to make my wife happy?" Well, you're asking me. As if you can't find your wife to ask her. A man who is a mashpia gets to know his wife's needs. He doesn't wait for her to beg, demand, scream. He pays attention and he gets to know what gives her pleasure and what gives her pain. There's no question that every marriage that goes bad, God forbid, begins with a loss of respect. The loss of respect is the first the first damage, um, the first weakness in a marriage. You have to respect your wife. What does that mean? If you're smarter than her, if you're stronger than her, if you're more capable than her, how are you going to respect her? What does respect mean, B'chlal? A recent survey, a secular survey, discovered that what keeps a couple together is not love, the way everybody thinks, it's respect. Couples who respect each other stay together. Those marriages succeed. Love does not keep people together. So, what is this thing called respect? What does it mean? It's not the same as admiration. Admiration is looking up to somebody, which means that they have more talent or more virtue or more whatever gifts than you do. You look up to somebody who's smarter than you, stronger than you, wiser than you, nicer than you. So they are above you in something, so you have to look up to them. A woman needs to admire her husband. It's crucial because she has to give away her entire life, her entire self to him. Your wife becomes Mrs. You. Doesn't even have a name of her own. It says in Torah, Al ken yaziv ish es aviv es imay. It doesn't even mention the fact that she has to leave her father and mother too, even more than the husband does. She has to change her name. So to be that completely committed to her husband, she really does have to admire him. She has to justify in her own mind why she's giving herself completely away to him. But respect is something else. Respect means not violating borders. Borders are a big subject these days. Borders between nations, borders between men and women. In other words, although you are married, and although you're going to share every part of your life with each other, including physical intimacy, there is still a border. She is she, and you are you, and you're not the same. She is an independent person, which means she has feelings that you don't have. She has opinions that you don't have. She has needs that you don't have. And you have to respect that. In fact, that's the definition of marriage. Marriage means you marry somebody who is not you, not even a close relative, a stranger. That's the whole point. The whole point is you can't be just you. In your life, there has to be someone else, someone other than you, which means independent of you. An independent person who chooses to give herself away to you. But she doesn't become your slave, and she doesn't become your clone, she doesn't become your shadow. Rabbeinu Gershom had to make a chayrim. Don't read her mail. She's still an independent human being. And you must respect that. So the first condition, if you want to have a pleasant relationship, you have to start with respect. You listen to couples, if you think about your own parents and how they talk to each other. When you were a kid, were you comfortable with the tone, with the sound of their conversation? Or did it bother you? Obviously, a husband who raises his voice to his wife in a threatening tone, the kids are going to run and hide under the beds. Because even a child knows that is not the right tone. Those are not the right words. But even if the words are fine and the tone is calm, there's a tone that is appropriate for marriage, and there's a tone that is inappropriate. I remember talking to a woman who was very critical and unhappy with her husband. And the way she was telling me, she spoke like this. She says, I told him that he better not. I said, did you actually do that with your finger? She says, yeah. I said, are you a kindergarten teacher? She said, yeah. I said, well, you got to be careful not to talk to your husband like he's in kindergarten. What's with wagging the finger? This is not how you talk to a husband or to a wife. That's how you talk to a child who needs to be disciplined. Can you imagine a husband saying to his wife, how many times do I have to tell you not to do that? Without raising his voice, without threatening. But is that appropriate? That's how you talk to a child. Actually, you shouldn't even talk to a child like that because it's a ridiculous question. How many times do I have to tell you? 18, 26, 102. What kind of question is that? You're not saying anything. So even for a child, that's inappropriate, but for a different reason. For a spouse, that is a lack of respect. Even calling each other from across the house. You're in one room, she's in another room, and you're screaming. You need to tell her something. That's like talking to an employee, talking to a slave. You don't scream at each other. You want to talk to her? Where is she? Go to where she is and talk to her. Unless it's an emergency and you can't. So, respect also means tznius. And this is so absolutely crucial. The husband who is not tznius with his wife immediately loses her respect. It's unavoidable. If you lower or loosen your standards of tznius in the home, she will lose respect. In general, how you handle intimacy, how you handle the bedroom, is going to be the deciding factor Will she look up to you or will she start to look down at you? So this idea that you're going to get married and then the two of you can do whatever you want, you can be at your worst behavior, you can let your standards down, you can be sloppy, you can be, and it's going to be wonderful because you're married, you're in love. It won't even last a week. Out of respect for your wife, you never tell her that you can't handle the 2 weeks when you're not allowed to be together. Don't degrade yourself. Don't make it hard for her to respect you because she desperately needs to. Not only respect, but admire. So, how you handle that is going to make a huge difference in the tone or in the atmosphere of the home. Do we have any questions so far? Here's a question. A lot of times I feel like things that I'm passionate about or things I'd ordinarily speak with my friends are things that wouldn't interest her too much. This is one of these subjects, one of these issues. You want to talk to your wife about something and she's really not interested. How are you supposed to feel about that and how are you supposed to handle that? You like to go to a certain park, amusement park. She doesn't like those. What do? You get angry at her? You're frustrated? You demand that she goes? If she doesn't enjoy it, it means that she's resisting or objecting to you. You discover what each other enjoys and you provide that enjoyment. So if she doesn't like amusement parks, we'll find out what she does like. That's not a disrespect or a rejection of you. You happen to like amusement parks. She doesn't. She is the other person. Same is true with topics. You like to talk a lot. She doesn't like to talk a lot. Not that she's refusing to talk. It's just not her most enjoyable activity. Or she likes to talk, but not about this. So should you demand that she take an interest? You can feel a little disappointed. That's understandable. And if I was talking to her, I would suggest that she show a little interest. But that would be lifnim mishuras hadin. There are subjects that she's not good at, that she's not familiar with, and she doesn't enjoy talking about it. Why is that a problem for you? You're taking it a little too personally. So, in general, a husband has to know that as much as he needs from his wife, as much as he depends on her, she depends on him much more. It's never just one way. It's always she needs you more than you need her. And you are there to take care of that, to provide that need. So, in a sense, you have to be a little a little more mature, a little more responsible. Here's another question. You mentioned that loosening tznius standards will cause her to lose respect. How does this thing change? Yeah, that loosening tznius standards will cause her to lose respect. Can you clarify what you meant by tznius? Like in what area? Not to walk around the house in boxers? Yes, yes. Show a little consideration. It's uncomfortable for her, and it should be uncomfortable. There's no reason to loosen the tznius. If you wouldn't walk around that way in front of a stranger, it's out of respect for the stranger. So why not respect for your husband, for your wife? So the wife should not lower her standards of tznius, because then he loses respect for her, and he shouldn't lower his standards. She shouldn't lose respect for him. There's a famous quote, a famous saying that says, "Familiarity breeds contempt." Two people who become a little too familiar with each other, not only do they lose respect, but it breeds contempt. You become disgusted with the person. That's not even hate, it's worse. Where does that happen? In the bedroom. But if you're familiar with each other because you know what kind of music you like, and you know what kind of food you like, and you know what kind of colors you like, you're very familiar. You understand each other very well. You feel very comfortable with each other. That's great. That's necessary, that familiarity. So, which familiarity breeds contempt? The familiarity of loosening or lowering your tznius. I mean, behaving like an animal is not going to win you any respect. So, eating like a mensch, not like a chayero, running around the house like a baby, not being able to control your appetites and your moods. This is not helpful. Another question. You just spoke about the 2 weeks of not being able to touch, etc. I got married and Baruch Hashem within 2 months got pregnant. And so have been without harchokis for almost our whole marriage so far. Now she's given birth, and it's hard to cope with the harchokis, especially because it can be long. It can be a long time. Yes, that's true. Do you know that Chassidim, at least some Chassidim, in the past, tried to arrange, actually purposely arrange, that the chuppah should be a chuppas nida, because they didn't want the relationship to begin in the bedroom, which is very impressive. When the marriage begins in the bedroom and then she's pregnant right away, and it stays in the bedroom for 9 months, and all of a sudden there are hachokas, yes, it can be pretty shocking. But this is where you need to be the man. You need to be the husband. You need to be the caretaker. Telling her that you're miserable is not helpful. So, as hard as it is, it's worth the effort. And even if it's making you crazy, you don't have to tell her. Tell your mashpia. Next question. Don't know if this is within the scope of the class, but if you can talk more about 2-3 years down the line, when Shana Rishena is over. Also speak about damage control, how to deal when fights keep on happening and not so much respect. Wife and husband berating each other due to behaviors like wife being lazy and husband addicted to phone. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Though intimacy will happen quite often, it obviously affects the amount of times it happens. Wife doesn't make herself extra attractive, even though she knows that the husband appreciates it and needs it, and also think it's unsneous to wear certain clothing by intimacy. Number 4, wife likes sleeping together every so often, even though it seems from Alter Rebbe's takana of beds, etc., that it's not to be done among Chassidim. So let's try to be a little logical. Let's try to make sense. The idea of sleeping in one bed is such an unnatural and senseless thought. It's so destructive. I can't believe that anybody would actually suffer through it. You get bored with each other. You get way too familiar with each other. And here's the really scary thing. In the average American home, I'm not talking about frum families, I'm talking about the average American home. There is no intimacy. There's none. Months go by and they don't have intimacy. And they're sleeping in the same bed. So the question is, if you're sleeping in the same bed, how can you not be intimate? No, that's not the question. The question is the opposite. If you keep sleeping in the same bed, how are you going to be intimate? Being in the same bed is no longer an intimate behavior. You just want to sleep. You're losing interest. You're getting too familiar. It kills the intimacy. It's a ridiculous idea. There were times when people were very poor and they couldn't afford 2 beds. Might not even be a bad idea to have 2 rooms. Certainly couldn't afford that. But kings, the aristocrats, the rich, they did have 2 bedrooms. Then the intimacy was real. If you're going to be intimate, it's serious, it's intentional, it's thoughtful. The king knocks on the queen's door. This is real. Not a lazy, sloppy, what the heck kind of intimacy. So the 2 beds is just such a sensible thing. First of all, it's respectful. Second of all, it doesn't dull you. It doesn't make you jaded. You get too used to being together without being attracted, without paying attention to each other. It is so nasty. In fact, when people ask, why do you have to have a mechitza in shul? Most people can understand. It's not a social event. It's not a party. And if you're sitting next to a woman, you're going to be distracted. Everybody can understand that. But the question remains, why can't husband and wife sit together in shul? So most people say, well, you can be distracted by your wife. That's not a good answer. Let me see if this makes sense to you. There's no such thing as distracted by your wife. Your wife is never a distraction. Adarab. It's like the Eibishter saying, don't daven while you're sitting next to your wife. It's insulting. When you're sitting next to your wife, you pay attention to your wife. He's not jealous of the attention. He expects you to pay attention to your wife. Does that mean you can never daven side by side with your wife at home? Yes, if you both decide that you're both in the mood for davening, you can daven. But that's in the informal setting and the mutual busyness. You're busy davening, she's busy davening. Yitzchak davened neichach ishtei. But that's because they were both into the davening. But the formality of a shul, maybe she's not in the mood for davening. So she's just going to sit there and you're going to ignore her. So the Eibishter is not competing for your attention. He's not jealous if you're paying attention to your wife. He decided that you should marry her. He chose her for you, and now he's jealous? Doesn't sound right. So here's the point. The point is, sleeping in the same bed means you ignore her night after night after night. This is going to be good for the marriage? Can't be. So when you have two beds, then the intimacy is intentional. You have to show an interest. You have to show some kind of effort. Once in a while, if you happen to stay in the bed, but if it becomes a habit, you're killing the intimacy. Every person needs a little private space. Her bed has to be hers. Now, what if you're already into your second, third year, and there's already arguments, and there's already disagreements and hard feelings? Whatever they are, take charge. Be responsible. You're right, it's not your fault. And this is a problem you never expected. You never saw this side of her. Okay. What are you doing to handle it? What you've tried isn't working. You screamed, you complained, you kretched about it. It's not helping. Well, what can you do to help? In other words, if you resent it, it means you resent being her husband. Well, that's not going to work at all. The marriage is over. You resent being her husband? You resent the responsibility of taking care of her? Then you've quit. She feels you quit. She becomes hysterical. Now she has to protect herself because you're not protecting her. So now everything you say threatens her. So she disagrees with everything you say, and she doesn't trust you in anything. Now she feels like she's running the home, taking care of the children, and she's all alone. She is frightened. She's trying to be tough, but only to hide the fear. And she is desperate because she realizes that she lost respect for you. So, whose job is this? It is always the husband's job. There's a letter from the Rebbe that says that in most cases, almost all cases, when there's a problem between a husband and a wife, it's the husband's fault. That doesn't mean that the husband caused the problem. It's the husband's fault if he caused the problem, or it's the husband's fault that the problem is not getting solved. Because when the husband refuses to take charge, that messes up the whole relationship. You're not the mashpia that she's looking for. Now she can't be makabel from you anymore. It's like in yeshiva, you had a mashpia, you thought very highly of him, you listened to every word he said, and then you found out that he's not a mensch. A nasty person. That's it. You can't be makabel anymore. Everything he says now sounds wrong. Can you fix it? Very easily. Very easily. Because she wants and needs to respect you. Just let her. Show her that you are responsible. Show her that you're not running away from her. You're not abandoning her. You're not giving up on her. That's all it'll take. Especially if it's only the third or fourth year. So the problem is fresh. It can heal very quickly, very easily. I was talking to a couple, I was talking to the woman actually, and she was complaining that he blames her for everything. He ignores her when he comes home. And she feels like the marriage is over. And this is many years. I think 18 years. So we could go through months and months of meetings and talking and counseling. But after that first meeting, I simply said, when he walks in the room, when he comes into the house, what do you feel? She said, frightened. I said, what, you're afraid of him? You're a very independent, capable woman. I don't think you're afraid of him. So she says, yeah, what I feel when he walks in is disgusted. Ekeldik. I said, do you think he doesn't notice that? He walks into his house, his home, his place, and what he sees is that he's disgusting to you. Now you want him to try to pay attention to you? How would you feel? You walk in the front door and you get a look of like you're a piece of dirt? Anyway, she texted me 3 days later. She says, I can't believe how different he is. And all I'm doing is looking at him with Rahmanis when he walks in instead of disgust. That's after 18 years of fighting. So just move to the right thing instead of trying to argue the problem. Start behaving properly, and it'll heal itself in hours. Let's see. If the wife is the Makabel and the husband is the Mashpia, that is supposed to be always looking out for his wife's needs. How is he supposed to convey to his wife his needs for intimacy without coming across as needy, Makabel, which can cause her to lose respect for him? Being that at times the man's need for intimacy can be more than the wife's. There's nothing embarrassing about wanting intimacy. Doesn't lose respect for you. She should take it as a compliment. It's when you act needy, when you get crazy, when you demand, when like you're sitting by the table and she serves you food. The way you eat the food is going to either turn her off or make her lose respect or admire you. If you eat like you're starving, if you eat with both hands, if you talk with your mouth full, if you slurp and come on, all you're doing is eating and you're hungry. But do it like a mensch. And the same is true with intimacy. By the way, you know that we teach children how to eat. Mashpiyim always would verbring with Bachrim how to eat like a mensch. Because the way you eat is the way you're going to be intimate. Watch the way a person is eating and you can tell a lot. I remember Rabbi Tenenbaum. We were in Bedford, and there's an English, the English part of the day, secular studies, but there was a group of us that didn't go to the secular, so we had class. We continued in the Beis Medrash the afternoon, and Rabbi Tenenbaum, who was the principal during the day, in the afternoons after he would become our Malamed. So we would sit in a little corner or a little room off the Beis Medrash, and we would learn. He told us that in Otvotsk, he was one of the top Talmidim in his yeshiva, in a Polish yeshiva, and he went to visit Tomchet Mimim because he heard so much about it. He wanted to see what it was. He wanted to see how they learn, what they learn. But it came out that he arrived during lunch. So at first he was a little disappointed. He wasn't going to see how they learn because he couldn't stay very long. But in the end, it turned out that seeing how the Bachurim ate made him switch to Tomchet Mimim and become Chabad. What was it about the way they ate? He couldn't describe it so well, but the one word he used was they had derech eretz for the food. They ate with derech eretz. You can see a Melamed teaching kids. You can see whether he has derech eretz for the kids. If he doesn't have derech eretz for them, either they're not going to be makabel, or they're going to become resentful, and what they're learning will become distasteful to them. The subject. because there's something distasteful about him, about the Malamed. And on the other hand, if you see that the Malamed respects the children, not admires, he doesn't look up to them, but he respects them, it's a whole different atmosphere. It's a whole different learning. So a mashpia is take the mashpia, and the mekabel is the mekabel. But if the mashpia doesn't have derech eretz for the mekabel, then he is not helpful, he's destructive. In Kloli HaChinuch V'Hadracha, it spells it out very clearly. In fact, it would be a good idea that part of the marriage study, marriage classes, Kloli HaChinuch V'Hadracha, the relationship between a mashpia and a mekabel. It's not exactly the same, obviously, but it's close enough. The klolim are the same. So how do you show your wife that you need intimacy? Like a mensch. You don't demand, you don't get frustrated, you don't beg, you don't act like a starving animal. Like a mensch. Then it's a compliment. In general, look, let's talk practical. It's very hard to tell a man how to behave in the bedroom. Because you're talking about passion, you're talking about taiva. It's very hard to say what you should do and how you should behave because you're not talking about a Beinani from Tanya. So anything a husband wants to do in the bedroom is allowed. But you got to hear this. Allowed is not impressive. Allowed is not impressive. When a college teacher asks me, are a couple allowed to take a shower together? I don't like the question. If it's allowed, then it should be done. In other words, if it's allowed, that's good enough. That's how you set standards. This is your idealism. Oh, it's allowed, fine, I'm doing it. The question is not, is it allowed? The question is it right? Not, is there anything wrong with doing? No, nothing wrong, then I'm doing it. In other words, you're living in the basement. Your standard is as low as it can go. Because if you go any lower, it's not a standard, it's a sin. So you're saying as long as it's not a sin, or some would say it's not a deraisa, it's not an issa deraisa, then fine, then I'm doing it. That's where I live. I live on the edge, the bottom end of the spectrum. If it's acceptably decent, I'm doing it. Okay. If that's where you are, that's where you are. But there's a ladder. The bottom rung is not the only rung. As you get older and the marriage matures, you climb the ladder. You don't remain on the same rung. It's like anything else. If it's a living thing, it has to grow. If it doesn't grow, then it's dying. Tznius between husband and wife is a ladder. You start off on a certain rung. It doesn't have to be the lowest. You start off on a certain rung. Over time, you climb higher. The beauty of it, the elegance, the edelkeit increases, not decreases. So maybe for the first year, for the first 2 years, you were pretty low on the ladder. No. So grow together. That can heal almost every problem. So how do you express your desire? Like a mensch. And if her answer is no, then you take it like a mensch. You don't grovel, you don't beg, you don't get violent, you don't scream. Question: what are ideal marriages that you have seen? What do smart couples do? Smart couples don't wait until there's a complaint. When you come home from work, is there something you can do for your wife before she even asks? Are you bringing something home that you know she'll enjoy? Did you think about her during the day and on the way home? What you can do to make her life better and happier? That's what you're there for. To invent, to discover all sorts of little ways of making her life easier and better. Somebody asked me once, "What is with these frum people? You treat women as if they're such incapable, miserable, dependent. You have to take care of them and protect them. They're not babies." The woman asking this question was a powerful CEO of a rich company. So I said, that was not directed at you. No man is going to open the door for you. No man is going to ask if you need a drink because you're quite capable on your own. The women that the Torah is talking about are wives who are working all day long. They have 4 kids in the house, 3 are in diapers, and you're not even going to try to help? So sure, if you're living alone and you're rich and powerful, nobody needs to help you, and nobody should. But a person who does need help, what do you mean you're not going to help? Oh, out of respect for the woman, you'll never do her dishes? So when you come home, how do you reward your wife knowing that she spent the entire day taking care of your home and your family and your children? Nothing. Unless she asks, demands, begs. Take the initiative. Be a husband because you want to be the husband, not because she's making demands. So if she is making demands, maybe it's because you don't do anything without being forced to. Maybe the only way she gets your attention is by making demands. So a smart person doesn't wait to be asked. Do your own thinking. What can I do to help her, to make her day a little easier, to make her life a little more enjoyable? As if you really liked her. Here's a question. Are you saying that if husbands take care of the issue, that will also end up affecting her and she'll try to fix her issues? There is absolutely nothing a wife won't do for you. Nothing. as long as she knows that you enjoy being her husband. If you give her that security, what's called v'simachas ishtay. What is it in the first year, the Shana Rishona? He doesn't go to the army, he doesn't go to work, he doesn't leave town. Why? He's busy. V'simachas ishtay. How do you make somebody happy? What do you do? A whole year? Buy her gifts every day? How do you make her happy? If you know what she needs, then you know how to make her happy. What does she need? She needs to know that she is absolutely safe in your hands. How can she be safe in your hands? If you worry about her more than she worries about herself. If you will do for her things that she wouldn't even do for herself. And husbands are always saying, I don't tell her what to buy. I give her the money. She can do whatever she wants with it. That's not nice. It's like, I don't want to hear about it. Here's money. Do whatever you want. Leave me alone. She needs you more than she needs the money. So she goes and she spends a certain amount of money. She comes home and she tells you, I just spent whatever money on a. You say, yeah, well, whatever. Don't do that. She needs you more than she needs your money. So don't think you're being a good husband because you let her do whatever she wants. She doesn't want to do whatever she wants. For that, she doesn't need to be married. So yes, if you take care of her, if she is secure in your hands, she will do everything for you. Everything. Okay, now, what if she doesn't seem to understand that you have a different personality? Slower in certain things, last minute person, etc., but amazing in other ways. And she doesn't seem to understand it. And she doesn't seem to understand the challenges and the hardships of balancing work, life, etc. What do you do if your wife is a little disappointed? You can't help it. She's disappointed in you. And you didn't do anything wrong. You were just being yourself. The main thing is, don't be intimidated. Don't lose your self-respect. If she does not appreciate who you are and has become critical of you, take responsibility. Like you can say to her, I see that you're impatient with my slowness, but the slow way that I do things so far has worked for me. Some people need to do things quickly, but I do pretty good driving slowly. It's not terrible. It's a different style. Really, the best thing is that somebody else should tell her. But if there's nobody else telling her, then you tell her without getting angry. Like she's sitting in the car with you, and she's telling you to slow down, to hurry up, to put on your blinkers. You can get very very insulted and angry and resentful, or you can say, "Thank you, but I've been driving for many years this way, and I'm doing pretty good. So leave the driving to us." You say it like a mensch, not defensively, not not angry. Just she has her way of driving, you have yours. And she's kind of expecting you to drive her way. So talk about it. Say everybody has their own style. And it's not like I don't know how to drive. So relax. We'll get there. Everything will be great. Somebody needs to advise the women, obviously. But right now we're talking about your side of it. How do you enjoy each other when there are so many kids? If there are so many kids, there are so many things to enjoy together. The kids are not strangers. They're not her kids. I can't believe it when men are jealous that their wife is spending more time with the baby, especially when the baby is newborn. You're jealous of a newborn? It doesn't make sense because it's your newborn. If she wasn't spending all that time, you would have to. So, what are you jealous that somebody is taking good care of your child? I don't understand that. It's a little immature. But that's the point. The point is every child you have together is another bond, another closeness, another nachas, another mutual responsibility. It brings you together, not apart. So instead of saying to your wife, can you neglect the kids for a minute and pay attention to me? Take care of the kids with her and enjoy it. How do I spark more interest in marriage? It's getting boring. And what does date night after marriage look like? If you're calling it date night, you're already in trouble. It's becoming too formalized. We need a date night because we really don't like each other so much, and it's like let's go back to dating. This marriage thing is boring. Dating was fun. Date night, you go out to eat one night a week so that she doesn't have to cook. That's much better than date night. Date night sounds like some kind of a therapeutic activity. Your marriage doesn't need therapy, it needs a little consideration and kindness. So, yeah, get a babysitter and one night go out and eat in her favorite restaurant. Why? Because she'll like it. You need a better reason than that? So, what does it mean that the marriage is getting boring? Marriage is life. Is your life boring? Could be. People find life boring, usually because they're not using their talents. When you have unused energy, unused talents, it becomes like food that you don't digest, and it just sits in your stomach feeling heavy. You know, Adin Evan Yisrael, Adin Steinsaltz, once complained to the Rebbe that he has so much to do, he has so many projects and so many commitments that he can't take it. He needs to lighten his load a little bit. What should he give up? The Rebbe gave him another project. And at first he was shocked. He speaks about it all the time. At first he was shocked, and then he realized that with this new project, he's feeling better. It gave him new energy. So, what was the heaviness that he was feeling? The unused talent. So, what does boring mean? There's nothing wrong with life. Boring means you have talents you're not using. It's not the marriage that is boring. Marriage is the best thing you have in your life so far. To blame your boredom on the marriage, you're saying my life is not what it's supposed to be. It's not enough. Not your marriage is not enough. The marriage, again, is so far the best part of your life. But it's not enough. So do more. But don't blame the marriage. The marriage is your stability. The marriage is your anchor. The marriage is your safe place. But there needs to be more. So do more. Is it always about her? Your relationship with her is always about her. Even in the intimacy, the physical intimacy, it's always about her. You're there to give, not to take. It's an interesting thing. Anything that is not the nature of a mashpia, a man has to avoid at all costs. If you're not acting like a mashpia, you're acting like a makabel, it's going to mess you up. You know the worst part of pornography that nobody ever talks about? What is the worst part of pornography? Machshava grobkeit, whatever. Okay. The worst part of pornography is that if you watch pornography, you become emasculated. Now you need Viagra. Because when you're watching pornography, you are the makabel. And that becomes a terrible habit. Now you can't be mashpia. You're emasculated. Your masculinity has leaked out. And that's why Zera Levatola is so devastating to a man. Because you're not being mashpia. There's no makabel. It's distorting the nature of the mashpia in you. And then eventually you can't be mashpia. So you got to really be careful. You know, in the secular world, people complain that the way a couple is supposed to be intimate is with the man on top and the woman on the bottom. And the feminists are very upset with that. They're ruining themselves, the feminists. They have forgotten how to be makabel. They're frustrated and miserable about it. And they don't realize what they just did. They didn't permit themselves to be makabel, so they're all frustrated. They don't feel like a real person. Because to a woman, a real person is a makabel. So what does it mean? Why does the husband have to be on top? It's not top or bottom. It's which way should you be facing. The man has to be facing the earth, and a woman is facing her husband. That's an insult to a woman. When you're making a baby, you have to be connected to your mocker. The man is min ha'adama, so he has to be facing the adama. The woman is from the man. Ki min ha'ish lukacha. So she has to face her mucker. That's how you have healthy babies. But also, mashpia means milmaila lamata. Mekabel means milmata lamaila. So anything that you do in which you're not the mashpia, it's going to ruin your masculine nature. It emasculates. Can you elaborate on what it means to avoid things that aren't the nature of a mashpia? And what if one's wife thinks that her husband should be doing those things? So let's try this again. The taivas that happen in a bedroom are hard to control. You can't make a rule that says you may not do this. You'll be punished if you do it. That's cruel. So the rung on the ladder, the madrega that you're on, that's where you're on. That's where you are, and you have to be honest about it. And a husband and wife have to tolerate that in each other. So if the wife is being frum and refusing to do what the husband wants, that's not correct. Isha ksheda eserit sein baila. Now, if she can't do it, if she doesn't, if she finds it personally disturbing, then of course you don't force her. You don't rape your wife. But if she can, and she's just refusing because the kala teacher told her or something, that's not right. But again, you can't force, you can't demand. But to make it a habit, to become careless about it, is really risky. Because the way you behave affects the way you feel. It's like, I don't know if this happened to you in your marriage, but it kind of explains things. A chos and kala come home from the chuppah, their first night together. They come into the room, and the husband says, "So, what do you want to do now?" Or, "What should we do now?" She already doesn't like him. Something is very wrong. In her mind, something just went very wrong. He's acting like a makabel. If you get into the habit of asking your wife, you're going to be emasculated. Either she won't answer you because she's disappointed, or she will answer you, and she will become the mashpia. And now both of you are miserable. So all the things that people do in the bedroom that is not mashpia and mekabel, like the different positions or the different activities that are not intimate, just mechanical, they're so destructive. I mean, if you know a little bit about the secular world and what goes on, it's so free, it's so loose. Everybody in their house is practicing pornography. And you would think that they would be happy. There is absolutely no happiness in the secular world. There is no intimate happiness. The poll that they would, the Pew poll, found that traditional couples are much happier with their intimacy, much, the ein arech, off the charts, much happier with their intimacy than the secular people. And the secular people can do anything and everything. That's exactly the problem. They do everything and anything, but not intimacy. Not what makes a man and what makes a woman a woman. So you have to be careful. Don't distort your nature and don't ignore it. So, what is the greatest pleasure that a man has? That he gave and it was niskabel. Remember the Rebbe Rashab went to see Freud to check him out? What did Freud say to Chassidim? You have to tell the Rebbe that you heard and that you understand. You have to be a makabel for the Rebbe's sake. Right? So what gives a man koyach? Even the Eberste. Nachas ruach lefonai sha'amarti v'nase retzeni. You responded to me. Not you obeyed me. You became what I needed, what I wanted. Nase retzeni. Not asur retzeni. So a mashpia gets all of his pleasure, all of his contentment, all of his satisfaction. He really feels like a mensch when he gave and it was received. If he gives and it's not received, that destroys him completely. It's like a comedian who tells his best joke and nobody laughs. It's devastation. That's it, he's finished. If he gives up and he decides that obviously I'm not a very good mashpia, so I'll become the makabel. I'll ask my wife what she wants to do in the bedroom. I'll let her take charge. Let her give me pleasure. It's always about her if you are a mashpia. Because you can't be mashpia if it's not her. Without the makabel, there is no hashpah. So yes, it's always about her. Not your life is about her. The marriage, the relationship is about her. But that's true in every relationship. If you have a relationship with the Rebbe, who is it about? All about the Rebbe. You have a relationship with the Eberste. What is the relationship? Einaid Muvade. Of course, from the Eberste's side and from the Rebbe's side, it's Mika Amcha Yisrael. Goy Echad Ba'aretz. So in every relationship, it's always the other. Otherwise, it's not a relationship. Question: how do I know that we have issues that are normal, not that we need real therapy? I don't think a couple ever need real therapy. I don't understand what it means. You can't get along on some biological level and you need therapy to be able to get along? That doesn't make any sense. There's really no such thing as marriage therapy. But There is personal therapy. A wife may need therapy. A husband may need therapy. The marriage just needs respect and kindness, not therapy. But what do you do if your wife literally needs therapy? She was traumatized as a child and she still hasn't gotten over it. And every little thing disturbs her. And she can't function and she has nightmares. This is the husband's job? Not really. If she has pneumonia, you're gonna treat her or you're gonna take her to a doctor. Personal therapy is often needed. Marriage therapy, there's no such thing. Stop looking at your wife with anger. Look at her with a little rachmanis, and everything is fine. For that, you don't need therapy. You need menschlichkeit. But if there really is an issue, like this guy say, I hate my wife. She has a border personality disorder. If that's true, it's not always true, but if it's true, then it's like she has pneumonia. What are you angry at her for? Here's a good question. Why are women on here listening? Are there? I don't know. Next question. What if she doesn't have interest in me and I'm trying my best? Well, can any woman not have interest in her own husband? It can't be that she's not interested. She's either attracted or she's turned off. Not interested is not an option. She's either feeling close to you or feeling distant from you. But there's no such thing as not interested. It's like saying she doesn't care. There's no way you can live with a man and not care. You either love him or hate him. You either feel secure or you feel frightened. So you really should get together with somebody. The question was changed. Okay, she hates me. Hate is the opposite of love. Where there is hate, there is also love, and you can switch it. So if she really hates you, she should talk to somebody, figure out what exactly it is. Is it correct? Is she seeing you correctly? Is she not seeing you correctly? Is there something you're doing that makes her hate you? Figure out what it is. Don't 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 step out of the relationship. Like she hates me, that's it. I'm turned off. I don't want to hear about it. If she hates you, she's having a problem. Help her with this problem. Her problem is that she hates you. Help her out. Don't fall apart. Question. I am married for 5 years and I'm always the one to initiate Tashmish. Is that an issue? No, it's not an issue. You should be the initiator. And as long as she is not refusing, then everything is fine. You don't have to be on the same wavelength of passion or of taiva. She's not so passionate, but she's available. She's there for you. That's good. See, expecting her to take initiative means you want to be the makabel. Why? Is it too hard to be a mashpia? Why would a man not want to be mashpia? Come on. 3 guesses. The only reason a man doesn't want to be a mashpia is because he's afraid of rejection. I will make a joke and nobody will laugh. I will become passionate and no one will respond. In other words, you don't have the confidence to be a mashpia. Mashpia has to be confident. And that's why you date. What is the purpose of the dating? The purpose of the dating is to see whether with her you have the confidence to be a mashpia. With many women, you won't have the confidence. She's smarter than you, stronger than you, faster than you. Doesn't bring out the mashpia in you. But the woman you marry, it's because with her you feel like a mashpia. You feel like there's something you can do for her, that you can give her. And you have the confidence. When did you lose it? How did you lose your confidence? Whatever it is, you get it back. How do I deal with her moods? You support the moods. You're never there to fight her on something. If the moods are a really serious problem, then she should go to a doctor. But you're not the doctor. You're not the one to heal her of those moods. You are there to support her in those moods. If she feels like she needs to go to sleep in the middle of the day, help her. Help her go to sleep. Don't say, why do you need to sleep so much? Hey, you're not the therapist. If she wants, then she should go to somebody who can help her. But you're there to support her, not to discipline her. Well, I can't let her go on. You can't let her. That's a loss of respect. So just think like a husband and you will have a wife. Don't be a policeman. Don't be her therapist. Don't be her rov. Don't be her musserzogger. Be a husband. Be somebody that she trusts and relies on completely, because you never will disappoint her. You'll never abandon her, even temporarily, like when she's in a bad mood. Again, as long as it's normal. If she has violent fits, then that's like pneumonia. And the same if you have violent fits. Don't expect her to fix it. Okay, I never expected this roller coaster ride. Some people complain about their children, that their relationship with their children is a roller coaster. It is. Never a dull moment. Always something new, always something different. But that's life. As long as you really care for each other, you can go on a roller coaster together. One more question. There has never, ever been a time that she asked for intimacy on her own, no matter how much I am mashpia. A mashpia gives what is needed. The mashpia who teaches his third grade students Shara Yichud Ve'emunah is not a mashpia. He's an abuser. Because he's forcing something on the students that they don't need to hear. They're not ready to hear. A mashpia is not somebody who always does what he wants and expects the makabel to cooperate. A mashpia is somebody who does what the makabel needs, provides for what the hunger demands. Now, of course, you always push a student a little further than their comfort zone. So you don't ask the Talmidim every day, are you in the mood to learn today? Or otherwise we won't. No. We're going to learn. But we're going to learn what you need to hear, what you're ready to hear, what you're capable of understanding, and a little more than your comfort zone. That's how the intimacy should be. You want a little more than she is comfortable with. And that's okay with her. But the main thing is she satisfied? Not are you satisfied? There was a story that somebody came to the Alter Rebbe in the early years of Chassidus and said, I'm a wealthy man, I give a lot of tzedakah, I have a lot of achnosas erchim, but I don't know if I am sincere. I think it's in Hayom Yom. Alter Rebbe's answer was, the hungry man who eats at your house, at your table, enjoys the food, appreciates the food sincerely. What more do you want? The rich man is the mashpia. A mashpia is bothered, disturbed by the hunger of the poor, and he wants to do something about it. So he provides food and feeds the hungry. Now this man comes to the Alter Rebbe and says, but I don't feel like I'm really sincere with a pnimius, with an emes. The Alter Rebbe's answer was, that is not a question for a mashpia. A mashpia's question is, what I gave the poor person, was it niskabel with an emes? Did it work? Did it solve the hunger? If yes, I'm successful. I'm perfect. Do I have to have a feeling that what I did? No. Not necessary. The mashpia doesn't introspect. He's always looking at the mekabel to see what else is needed. That's mashpia. That's hafotzas hamayones. That's outreach. That's Chabad work. What does the mekabel need? Am I being 100% sincere? No, probably not. You're a hypocrite. But that's not the opposite of a mashpia. The opposite of a mashpia is when you want somebody else to give you what you're hungry for. If you want the poor man to feed you, now you're not a mashpia. Or if you want to teach the man how to make a living and all he wants is food, then you're not a mashpia. Now, if you have needs, and who doesn't, there are places, there are times, and there are relationships in which you are the Makabel. And that's why the Rebbe was saying you have to have a mashpia. Because when you feel like a Makabel, you have to find your mashpia. To your mashpia, you're a Makabel. Not to your wife. To your wife, you're the mashpia. The wife is your Makabel, but to her children, she's a mashpia. So everything has to be appropriate to the relationship. If you learn a Maimar Chassidus, or you went into Yechidus, and you know what it feels like to be Makabel, now you can go home and be a better husband. The better you understand the Makabel, the better you are at being Mashpia. But don't become the Makabel in your marriage. You feel needy? Talk to your Mashpia, not to your Makabel. Does what you said earlier mean that the wife can never give pleasure to her husband if she enjoys it? I didn't say never. Let's not use those words. Never, always. You gotta in this area you have to be flexible. But don't make a habit of switching roles, of her being mashpia, you being makabel. On occasion it's nice. There's room for it. Metalmida yesa mikulam. In some way, you're makabel from your makablim. But don't lose yourself. Don't give up on being mashpia, because that's really where your pleasure comes from. The other pleasure, what she can do for you to give you pleasure, that's just gashmias. That's just a. It's not a satisfying pleasure. It's just a momentary pleasure. It's like chocolate. It tastes wonderful, but it doesn't do anything for you. Okay, so wouldn't it be nice if sometimes it comes from her as well? Really, what you're asking is, I need to know if she really appreciates what I'm giving her. If she never asks for it, it makes it look like she doesn't really want it. So when I'm giving to her, she doesn't really want, so I'm not a mashpia. So you're using that, it sounds like. If she never asks for intimacy, you're getting the feeling that when you're being intimate, she doesn't really need it. She doesn't really appreciate it. And that would be devastating, because when you're being mashpia and it's not being niskabel, that's like erva inan in reverse. Like Delilah frustrated Shimshon by not being Mikabel. Why does it look like all the other couples I know don't enjoy marriage? Even my parents. What's the deal with their marriages? It doesn't seem fun and enjoyable. Even in those unhappy couples, the marriage is the best thing in their life. Why aren't they enjoying it? Very good question. Very good question. It's the best thing in their life, and they're not happy with it. But it's not the marriage that is to blame. It's either because he's not mashpia, she's not mikabel properly, or because they've lost respect. And that's why to simply say, well, then they should get divorced. No, that would be a disaster. Because the marriage is the thing that keeps them sane. The marriage is the most stable, the most wonderful part of their life. And as you can see, people who get divorced, they fall apart. They stop being human because the marriage was keeping them healthy. Why can't it also keep them happy? That's why we need to talk about this. You need to get the most out of your marriage, not the least. But the marriage is always wonderful. The fact that you're married. You just have to make it as good as it can be. And it can be. About the initiative, I saw, I believe, in an ad that that a couple should talk about how they arrange the initiative. Sometimes her and sometimes him. How does that work? It's not a good idea. It's an American mishigas. The husband has to be the husband all the time, and the wife has to be a wife all the time. Again, other than on occasion, an exception to the rule. I just realized I asked all my questions not to you, just to the organizer. What should I do? You mean about why women are listening? How do you recommend to choose a mashpia for both of us? There shouldn't be a mashpia for both of you. Your mashpia should be private, should be just between you and the mashpia, and her mashpia should be private to her. Give yourself a little space. Give her a little space. Okay, here's an important question. How does being mashpia or leader work with disagreement? She says, you always do what you think, etc. Meaning, on the other hand, the husband is also a partner and you got to work things out. In other words, he can't just do what he wants because he's a mashpia. Though I know you don't like the partner perspective in marriage. Of course, there's an obligation, not just privilege. A mashpia is not privileged that he can do whatever he wants. That is completely wrong. He can't do anything that doesn't work for her. What I'm saying is, not that the mashpia should always do what he wants. The mashpia should always take responsibility for what needs to happen. Never drop the responsibility. Never leave her alone with a problem. You're always there because you're always willing to take responsibility. Not you're always willing to take charge, to be a dictator. Can you talk about when in the mitzvah we have to try to do it her on top because it hurts her the regular way? And that's what stops her from actually performing the mitzvah. Otherwise, and I realized that I asked my question to the organizer. There's no question that if it hurts, you can be makel, but it's got to be solved. It can't go on. You can't live your life like that, because again, your mashpia role is being destroyed. So until you find a solution, you can be makel, but you must find a solution. I don't get this question. Kindly give me some concrete ways for this week that I can do. Concrete tasks. Okay. What can we all do this week to make our marriages better? You can stop and ask yourself, am I generous enough with my wife? And generous doesn't mean money. Doesn't mean only money. Be generous with your time. Like, for example, people who came to see the Rebbe always commented on the fact that the Rebbe acted like he had nothing else to do, that he had all the time in the world for you, and it was only a minute. But he was generous with that minute. He didn't talk to you on one foot, looking at his watch. Be generous with your time. When you're talking to your wife, there's nothing else you want to do. There's no place else you want to go. There's no one else you would rather be talking to. You're completely there for that time. Generosity in time. Then generosity in space. Allow her into your space. Don't keep her at arm's distance emotionally. Be generous with your words. If she does something nice and you appreciate it, say so. Women desperately need appreciation, more than compliments. Men need compliments. Women need to be appreciated. Just don't take me for granted. That's all a woman wants. I'll do whatever I need to do, but don't take me for granted. Notice what I do and express appreciation. That's generosity with words. And then you have to be generous with your opinion. Don't be critical. Don't look for faults. Don't notice every little fault. Look at the positive. That's number one. Number two, respect. Check it out. Do you talk to her respectfully? I mean, respectfully. Don't talk down to her. Check it out, because it could be that without realizing it and without meaning to, you are talking down to her and it hurts. So respect, dignity. Are you making it hard for her to respect you? Are you thinking, I can do whatever I want and she better respect me? Or she will respect me because I'm her husband. Don't do that. So number one, check out your generosity. Number two, check out your dignity and your respect of her and her respect for you. Are you making it hard on her to respect you? And number three, where's the Edelkeit? Marriage is supposed to lift you up, make a real mensch out of you, bring out the best in you. So don't stop growing. It's an avodah. Avodah means progress, not staying in the same place and certainly not going downwards or backwards. So where is the Kedusha? A marriage without Kedusha is a disaster. It's like the world without a Torah. It's going to be a churban. The marriage has to have a certain amount of Kedusha, a certain amount of realization that you're doing something that really human beings shouldn't be allowed to do. It's too important, it's too high, it's too holy. Making a baby? You're making a baby? You're allowed to do that? You're allowed to tamper with neshamas, bring neshamas, make neshamas. What qualifies you to do that? So realize that you're playing with fire. And it's a privilege. So that's the final thought for tonight. How you behave in the bedroom has a powerful effect on the babies that are born. The secular world is just starting to catch on. The medical world, the scientific world, a fetus feels and hears everything from the moment of conception. Even thoughts and feelings just before conception. So when you're doing the mitzvah of Pru Revu, you want to do your kid a favor? Then pay attention. What is the best way to introduce a neshama into this world? What is the best way to bring a baby into the world? With which machshavas, with which kavanas, with which feelings? And that's why if you're a little bit drunk, you should not be trying to make a baby. It's not good for the baby. If you're angry at your wife, don't make a baby out of anger. You're going to have an angry kid on your hands. If you've already decided to get divorced, you're not even allowed to stay in the house because you might make a baby and the baby is going to be disturbed and torn in two directions. So out of responsibility for the baby, make sure that the intimacy is good enough for the baby. So I remember hearing the story about the Kotzker Rebbe. I heard it when I was a young teenager and it left a big impression. The Kotzker Rebbe was pretty much isolated in the last years of his life. He stayed in his room and was Heche from Welt. So the Chassidim thought that the Rebbe wasn't really paying attention. But one Shabbos afternoon, the Kotzker asked where a certain Chassid was who usually would come that Shabbos, and he didn't come. So somebody said that he's having a problem with his business, and he's upset, and he's depressed, and he couldn't come. And the Kotzker said, he? No. If he would have a problem with his business, he wouldn't get upset and he wouldn't get depressed. It's not his personality. He would be here and he would fix the problem. Chassidim were a little bit amazed that the Rebbe knew the Chassid so well. So they said, Rebbe, what about another Chassid What is his personality? How would he handle a crisis? And the Rebbe described him with intimate detail. They went from one to another until finally somebody said to him, Rebbe, what about your son? The Kotzker said, do I know my son? I know with what machshavos I invited him into this world. That's called intimacy. So make the bedroom a little holier. It's very healthy. It's very good for everybody. How do I know? Because if it's good for the baby, then it's good for the mother and it's good for the father. If it's not good enough for the baby, it shouldn't be good enough for you. Is that being too idealistic? Is that trying to be a malach? No. It's simply treating marriage the way marriage needs to be treated. It's greater than a malach. No malach could do this. But we can. We can, we need to, and we get so much benefit from it. It would be foolish not to. Not overnight. Don't come home and tell your wife that from now on everything changes. Introduce the changes slowly, considerately, mutually agreeable. Raise your marriage to a higher level, which means raise yourself and your wife to a holier bedroom. You won't regret it. Well, thank you all for listening. The rabbi is here. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the mitzvah. And we should all have healthy, happy, holy marriages. It's the only way to fly. Good night. Good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi Friedman, very much. This was awesome. Really appreciate it.
Hatzlacha Rabbah.